3-year-old Emma Martinez hadn't spoken a single word in 8 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. Rosa Martinez kept count, because each silent day felt like a small death of the vibrant, chattering little girl her daughter used to be. Before that terrible night in March, Emma had been a tiny chatterbox who narrated everything from the colors of passing cars to the names she invented for neighborhood cats. She would wake up singing nursery rhymes and fall asleep telling elaborate stories about magical princesses and brave knights to her collection of stuffed animals. The transformation had been devastating and instantaneous. One moment, Emma was her bubbly, talkative self, helping Rosa fold laundry while babbling about her day at preschool. The next moment, she was pressed against their apartment window, watching in horror as rival gang members exchanged gunfire in the courtyard below. Rosa had pulled her daughter away from the window too late. Emma had already seen a young man, barely older than a teenager, collapse in a pool of blood just 20 feet from their building's entrance. That night, Emma crawled into her mother's bed, trembling and whimpering. When Rosa asked what was wrong, expecting her daughter to describe the scary sounds or express confusion about what they'd witnessed, Emma simply stared at her with wide, haunted brown eyes. No words came, and no words had come since. The doctors at Children's Hospital had been kind but frustrating in their explanations. Dr. Patricia Hoffman, a child psychologist with gentle hands and infinite patience, had spent hours with Emma, using play therapy, art therapy, and every technique in her considerable arsenal. The diagnosis was selective mutism, triggered by acute trauma. Emma's mind had essentially decided that speaking was too dangerous, that words might somehow bring back the terrible thing she'd witnessed. She understands everything, Dr. Hoffman had explained to Rosa during one of their many sessions. Her cognitive abilities are completely intact. She hears you, processes everything you say, and wants to respond. But her brain has created this protective barrier. She'll speak again when she feels completely safe. But when would that be? Rosa had tried everything. She'd moved them to a different apartment across town, hoping a change of scenery might help. She'd enrolled Emma in a new preschool with specially trained teachers who understood trauma responses in young children. She'd bought new toys, taken Emma to the zoo, the beach, the children's museum, anywhere that might spark joy and encourage her daughter to find her voice again. Nothing worked. Emma would smile occasionally, nod or shake her head to communicate basic needs, and sometimes even laugh silently at funny cartoons. But her voice remained locked away, as if she'd swallowed the key and forgotten where she'd put it. The isolation was crushing Rosa's spirit. At the grocery store, well-meaning strangers would coo at Emma and ask her age or name. When Emma remained silent, they'd look at Rosa with that mixture of pity and judgment that suggested she wasn't trying hard enough to help her child. Friends and family members offered endless advice. Just be patient, they'd say. Or, have you tried bribing her with ice cream? Or worse, maybe she's just being stubborn. Rosa's mother, Elena, was particularly vocal in her opinions. In my day, children spoke when spoken to, she'd declare during Sunday dinners, as if Emma's silence was a matter of discipline rather than deep psychological trauma. You baby her too much, Mia. Sometimes you have to be firm. But Rosa knew better. She could see the intelligence blazing in Emma's dark eyes, could feel her daughter's frustration when she couldn't communicate complex thoughts or needs. Emma had developed an elaborate system of gestures and facial expressions, but Rosa could tell it wasn't enough for a child who had once possessed an enormous vocabulary for her age. The breakthrough moment came on an unseasonably warm Saturday morning in October. Rosa had been scrolling through community event listings on her phone, desperately searching for anything that might help Emma. That's when she saw the announcement for Griffith Park, Police Community Day. Meet your local officers. see canine demonstrations, learn about safety, and enjoy free food and activities for the whole family. Initially, Rosa's instinct was to avoid anything involving police. Emma's trauma was connected to violence, and law enforcement represented a complex mixture of safety and danger in their East Los Angeles neighborhood. But something about the event description intrigued her. Maybe seeing police officers in a positive, non-threatening context might help Emma understand that not all authority figures were connected to scary situations. She spent the entire Friday night second-guessing the decision. What if seeing uniforms triggered Emma's memories of that terrible night? What if the crowd was too overwhelming? What if Emma had another panic attack like the one she'd experienced at the 4th of July celebration 2 months earlier? But Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of golden California sunshine that made everything feel possible. Emma seemed unusually alert during breakfast, actually making eye contact with Rosa and nodding enthusiastically when asked if she wanted to go to the park. It was the most engaged she'd seen in weeks. They arrived at Griffith Park just as the event was getting into full swing. Families with children of all ages wandered between booths showcasing different aspects of community policing. There were fingerprinting stations, bicycle safety demonstrations, and a display of police motorcycles that had several young boys absolutely mesmerized. Emma's grip on Rosa's hand was firm, but not panicked as they moved through the crowd. She seemed particularly interested in a booth where officers were teaching children about stranger danger through puppet shows. For a moment, Rosa felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this would be the day Emma found her voice again. That's when they approached the K-9 demonstration area, where a small crowd had gathered around Officer Jake Sullivan and his partner. Bruno was a magnificent Belgian Malinois with intelligent amber eyes and a coat that gleamed in the sunlight. Officer Sullivan, a tall man in his early 30s, with kind eyes and an easy smile, was explaining how police dogs were trained to help keep communities safe. Bruno here has been my partner for 4 years, Officer Sullivan was saying to the fascinated audience. He's helped us find missing children, locate illegal drugs, and even track down suspects who thought they could outrun the law. But most importantly, he's a gentle giant who loves meeting new friends. Emma stood transfixed, staring at the beautiful dog with an intensity that made Rosa's heart race. Something was happening. She could feel it in the way her daughter's small hand had begun to tremble in hers, in the way Emma's breathing had changed from calm to rapid and shallow. Rosa was about to suggest they move on to a different demonstration, when Emma did something that would change both their lives forever. She pulled free from her mother's grasp and began walking directly toward the police dog, her small sneakers crunching on the dried grass with determined steps. The crowd fell silent, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Emma stopped just 3 feet from Bruno, raised her tiny index finger, pointed directly at the magnificent animal, and spoke her first words in 8 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. But they weren't the words anyone expected to hear. The words that came out of Emma Martinez's mouth after 8 months of silence weren't mama or doggy, or any of the gentle first words a mother might hope to hear from a traumatized child. Instead, Emma's small voice rang out across the demonstration area with startling clarity and unmistakable terror. Bad man. The effect was immediate and electric. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Parents instinctively pulled their children closer. Officer Sullivan's hand moved reflexively toward his radio, his training kicking in, even as his mind struggled to process what a 3-year-old could possibly mean. Rosa felt her knees buckle as 8 months of desperate prayers seemed to be answered in the most confusing way possible. Emma, baby, what did you say? Rosa whispered, dropping to her knees beside her daughter. But Emma wasn't looking at her mother. The little girl's dark eyes were fixed on something beyond the police demonstration, scanning the crowd with the intensity of a searchlight. Her small body was rigid with tension, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to snap. "Bad man, Emma," repeated, louder this time, her voice carrying the kind of primal fear that makes every adult in earshot pay attention. She began pointing not at Bruno, as everyone had initially assumed, but at various faces in the crowd that was now shifting, and murmuring with uncomfortable energy. Officer Sullivan had been a cop for 12 years, and his instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. Children didn't break months of silence to shout about bad men unless they had a very good reason. But it was Bruno's behavior that confirmed his suspicions. The Belgian Malinois, who had been calmly sitting in perfect demonstration form just moments before, was now exhibiting classic alert behavior. The dog's entire demeanor had transformed. His ears were forward, his body tense, and his nose was working frantically as he circled Emma with focused intensity. Bruno wasn't responding to the child's distress. He was responding to something else entirely. Something he'd been trained to detect. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm," Officer Sullivan said quietly to Rosa, his voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from years of experience with dangerous situations. "Bruno is alerting to something. Has your daughter been around any? Medications today? Any cleaning supplies? Anything unusual?" Rosa's mind raced. Nothing. Just breakfast and her vitamins, and she stopped, her face pale. "Officer, I don't understand what's happening." She hasn't spoken in 8 months. She was traumatized by a shooting in our neighborhood, and the doctor said, "Bad man, bad man." Emma's voice was getting louder, more insistent. She had begun, backing away from the crowd, pulling Rosa with her, but Bruno followed them with laser focus. The dog's behavior was unmistakable to his handler. This was a positive alert for narcotics. Officer Sullivan felt his heart rate spike. A drug detection dog alerting on a 3-year-old child who had just broken months of silence to scream about a bad man was either the strangest coincidence in his career or something much more sinister. His training told him to treat this as a potential crime in progress. "Ma'am, I need to ask your permission to check your daughter's belongings," he said, gesturing to Emma's small pink backpack decorated with cartoon unicorns. "Bruno is trained to detect illegal substances, and he's giving me a very strong indication that something's not right." Rosa's eyes widened in horror. "You think Emma has drugs?" "That's impossible. She's 3 years old. I watch her every second." Her voice cracked with the kind of panic that only an innocent parent can truly convey. The crowd that had been watching the demonstration was now watching a real-life drama unfold. Some people were discreetly filming with their phones. Others were ushering their children away from what was clearly becoming a police investigation. But a few individuals in the crowd were moving in a different direction toward the parking lot with quick, purposeful steps. Emma noticed them too. Her small finger shot out again, pointing at a man in a baseball cap who was walking rapidly toward a black sedan. "Bad man. Bad man go?" Officer Sullivan's head snapped in the direction Emma was pointing. The man she'd identified was now jogging toward his car, and something about his body language set off every alarm bell in the officer's mind. But first, he had to deal with the immediate situation, a drug dog alerting on a toddler. "I'm going to look in the backpack now," Officer Sullivan announced, his voice carrying to the gathered crowd. He wanted witnesses to this search, wanted everything to be transparent and above board. Rosa nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face as she unzipped Emma's tiny backpack with shaking hands. The contents looked innocent enough at first. Glance, a juice box, some goldfish crackers, a small stuffed elephant, Emma's favorite blanket, and a pack of crayons. But Bruno's nose led Officer Sullivan to the juice box. It felt wrong, too heavy, and there was a strange rattle when he shook it gently. Inside the hollowed-out juice box, wrapped in plastic and hidden with sophisticated care, were 3 small bags of white powder and what appeared to be a miniature digital scale, no bigger than a credit card. The collective gasp from the crowd was audible. Rosa screamed a sound of pure maternal anguish that cut through the autumn air like a knife. "I don't know how that got there. I swear on my mother's grave, I have no idea how." "Ma'am, I believe you," Officer Sullivan said quickly, but his eyes were scanning the crowd for the man Emma had identified. Too late, the black sedan was already pulling out of the parking lot, its license plate obscured by a conveniently placed piece of cardboard. Emma, meanwhile, had grabbed onto Bruno's neck and was hugging the police dog with desperate intensity. For the first time since she'd started speaking again, her voice dropped to a whisper. "Good dog help Emma. Bad man hurt Mama." Officer Sullivan felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a drug case. This was something much more complex and potentially dangerous. A 3-year-old doesn't develop sophisticated fears about bad men without experiencing something genuinely threatening. And someone with access to Emma had been using her as an unwitting drug mule, banking on the fact that no one would ever suspect a traumatized toddler. He keyed his radio with one hand while keeping his eyes on the crowd. "This is Sullivan at Griffith Park. I need backup and a detective. We've got a possible child endangerment situation with narcotics involved, and at least one suspect who just fled the scene." As he spoke, Emma continued clinging to Bruno, her small voice, now a steady stream of months of pent-up communication, pouring out in a flood of 3-year-old observations. "Bad man give Emma special bag. Bad man say no tell Mama. Bad man have shiny thing like you. Bad man scared Emma." The last comment made Officer Sullivan's blood run cold. Shiny thing like you could only mean one thing: a badge. Emma was describing someone in law enforcement, someone who had used his position of authority to terrify a traumatized child into silence and compliance. As backup units arrived and the crowd was secured for questioning, Officer Sullivan realized they weren't just dealing with a drug trafficking case. They were potentially looking at police corruption, child exploitation, and a 3-year-old witness who had just become the key to unraveling something much bigger and more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Emma's 8 months of silence hadn't been just trauma, it had been protection. And now that she was finally speaking, everyone who heard her words understood that this little girl had been carrying secrets far too heavy for such small shoulders. Detective Maria Santos arrived at Griffith Park within 12 minutes of Officer Sullivan's radio call, her unmarked sedan cutting through weekend traffic with the kind of urgency reserved for cases involving children. At 42, she had spent 15 years working everything from gang violence to domestic abuse, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for what she found at the community demonstration. The scene was controlled chaos. Uniformed officers had cordoned off the K9 demonstration area with yellow tape, creating a perimeter that kept curious onlookers at bay while preserving potential evidence. Families who had come for a pleasant Saturday outing were now being interviewed by police, their children's faces reflecting confusion and fear. In the center of it all sat 3-year-old Emma Martinez, still clutching Bruno, the police dog, while speaking in a steady stream of consciousness that was both heartbreaking and crucial. "Bad man say Emma good girl," Emma was telling Officer Sullivan, her small hands buried in Bruno's thick fur. "Bad man say Mama needs special medicine. Emma carries special medicine for Mama. No tell nobody about special medicine or Mama gets sick forever." Detective Santos felt her jaw clench as she absorbed the implications. Someone had not only used a traumatized 3-year-old as a drug mule, but had done so by exploiting her love for her mother. The psychological manipulation required to convince a child to keep such dangerous secrets spoke to a level of criminal sophistication that went far beyond street-level drug dealing. Rosa Martinez sat on a nearby bench, her face streaked with tears and her hands shaking uncontrollably. Every few seconds, she would look at her daughter with a mixture of relief that Emma was finally speaking and horror at what those words revealed. Detective Santos approached her first, her voice gentle but professional. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm Detective Santos. I know this is overwhelming, but I need to ask you some questions about Emma's recent activities. Can you think of anyone who might have had access to her backpack? Anyone who spent time alone with her?" Rosa's voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't understand how this happened. I watch her constantly. After the shooting, after she stopped talking, I never let her out of my sight. The only time." She stopped, her eyes widening with sudden realization. "The only time what, Mrs. Martinez? Last Tuesday?" Emma had a doctor's appointment with Dr. Hoffman, her therapist. "I always go with her, but Dr. Hoffman said sometimes children open up more when parents aren't in the room. She asked if I would wait outside for just 15 minutes while she tried a new technique with Emma." Rosa's hands flew to her mouth. "But Dr. Hoffman would never. She's been helping us for months." Detective Santos made a note, but her instincts told her the therapist wasn't their perpetrator. "Anyone else? Family members? Neighbors? Service workers?" Rosa shook her head frantically, then stopped again. "Wait, there was someone else. A police officer came by the apartment building on Wednesday. He said he was doing follow-up interviews about the shooting Emma witnessed. He wanted to talk to all the families who saw what happened." Detective Santos felt her pulse quicken. "Did you get his name? Badge number? Officer Rodriguez, I think. Or maybe Ramirez. I'm sorry, I was so focused on keeping Emma calm. She got very upset when she saw his uniform, started hiding behind me. He said that was normal for trauma victims and that he just needed to ask a few routine questions." "Was Emma in the room during this interview?" "Yes, she was sitting right next to me on the couch, coloring in her book. But she kept staring at him, and she seemed so scared. More scared than usual." Rosa's voice cracked. The officer was very patient with her. He even brought her a small gift, some new crayons and a juice box. Said all the kids in the building were getting treats to help them feel better about talking to police. Detective Santos felt ice form in her veins. "Mrs. Martinez, do you still have that juice box?" Emma was carrying it today. She wanted to bring it to the park because Rosa's face went white as understanding dawned. Oh my God, the juice box he gave her. That's where the drugs were hidden. While Detective Santos processed this revelation, Emma continued her stream of disclosures to Officer Sullivan, each detail more disturbing than the last. The child's memory, freed from months of enforced silence, was remarkably clear about specific events that had terrified her into muteness. "Shiny man say Emma's special helper," she was explaining, her voice taking on the careful cadence children use when repeating adult instructions. "Shiny man say bad people hurt Mama if Emma tell secrets. Emma no tell secrets. Emma good girl." Officer Sullivan exchanged a meaningful look with Detective Santos. Shiny man was clearly Emma's way of describing someone with a badge police. Officers weren't the only ones who wore shiny metal, but given the context, it was the most logical interpretation. "Emma, sweetheart," Detective Santos said, crouching down to the child's eye level. "Can you tell me what the shiny man looked like? Was he tall or short?" Emma considered this question with the seriousness that only small children can bring to important adult conversations. "Tall like Mama's brother. Hair like Papa's before Papa go away. Voice like thunder, but not scary thunder. Nice thunder." Rosa gasped. Her father had a deep voice. She's describing someone with a voice similar to her father's, warm but authoritative. "Anything else about how he looked, Emma?" The little girl nodded enthusiastically. "Shiny man have picture on wall." She pointed to a bulletin board near the police booth, where various department photos and community policing information were displayed. Detective Santos felt her heart skip a beat. She walked over to the bulletin board, Emma still in her arms, and began pointing to different photos. "Is the shiny man in one of these pictures, Emma?" Emma studied each photograph with intense concentration, her small finger hovering over several faces before moving on. Then suddenly she stopped. Her entire body went rigid, and she pressed her face into Detective Santos's shoulder. "That one," she whispered, her voice muffled but unmistakable. "That's the shiny man who give Emma special medicine for Mama." Detective Santos looked at the photograph Emma had identified, and her blood ran cold. The picture showed Officer Anthony "Tony" Reeves, a 15-year veteran of the LAPD with commendations for community service and youth outreach. He was scheduled to work the community event today, but had called in sick at the last minute, something that now seemed far too convenient to be coincidental. Officer Reeves had access to evidence lockers, detailed knowledge of ongoing investigations, and most importantly, the trust that came with wearing a badge. If he was using that trust to manipulate traumatized children and their families, the implications went far beyond simple drug trafficking. "Officer Sullivan," Detective Santos called out, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I need you to contact dispatch immediately. Put out a bolo for Officer Anthony Reeves. Consider him armed and extremely dangerous." As Officer Sullivan reached for his radio, Emma lifted her head from Detective Santos's shoulder and spoke again, her words chilling in their innocent clarity. "Shiny man say he come back soon. He say Emma gonna help him with more special medicine. He say Emma mama gonna be very happy." The realization hit everyone simultaneously. Officer Reeves wasn't just a corrupt cop who had used Emma once. He was planning to use her again, and he had no idea that his small, silent accomplice had finally found her voice. Detective Santos hugged Emma tighter, her mind already racing through the implications. They weren't just dealing with a single incident of child exploitation. They were looking at what could be a systematic operation using traumatized children as drug mules, orchestrated by someone with inside knowledge of police procedures and access to victim families. The community event had been supposed to build trust between police and residents. Instead, it had exposed a betrayal of that trust so profound that it would shake the entire department to its core. Emma's 2 words at the park had opened a door that could never be closed again. The LAPD's Internal Affairs Division descended on the Griffith Park scene like a SWAT team responding to a hostage situation. Within 30 minutes of Emma's identification of Officer Anthony Reeves, the parking lot had transformed into a command center bristling with unmarked vehicles, crime scene technicians, and federal agents from the D who had been monitoring suspicious activities in the East LA drug trade for months. Captain Jennifer Walsh, a steel-eyed veteran who ran internal affairs with the precision of a Swiss watch, arrived personally to oversee what was rapidly becoming the department's worst nightmare. A decorated officer using traumatized children. As drug mules wasn't just criminal, it was the kind of scandal that could destroy public trust for decades. "Tell me we have containment on this," Captain Walsh said to Detective Santos as they watched Emma continue her remarkable testimony to a specially trained child psychologist who had been rushed to the scene. "Ma'am, I wish I could, but this is bigger than one rogue officer," Detective Santos replied, consulting her rapidly filling notebook. "Emma's been providing details for the past hour, and the picture she's painting suggests a systematic operation. Officer Reeves wasn't working alone. Emma, now sitting cross-legged on a blanket with Bruno beside her, was drawing pictures with remarkable detail for a 3-year-old. Each crayon sketch revealed another piece of the horrifying puzzle. Multiple adults in uniform, different locations, other children who looked scared and confused. "Emma draw all the shiny people," she announced proudly, holding up a picture. That made every adult in the vicinity feel sick. The drawing showed 5 figures wearing what were clearly meant to be police badges, surrounding smaller figures that were obviously children. In the center of the drawing was a building with bars on the windows. Dr. Sarah Chun, the child psychologist, kept her voice gentle and encouraging. "Emma, sweetie, can you tell me about this building? Have you been there?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Shiny man take Emma to special house. Lots of kids there. Kids have special jobs like Emma. Kids carry special medicine too." She pointed to her drawing. "Sad kids. No mamas there." Detective Santos felt her stomach drop. Emma was describing what sounded like a safe house or distribution center where multiple children were being used as drug mules. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about Officer Reeves, but potentially an entire network of corrupt officers exploiting vulnerable children from broken homes. Captain Walsh pulled Detective Santos aside. "I need you to understand something. Officer Reeves has been with the department for 15 years. He's got commendations, community service awards, and a spotless record. If Emma's telling the truth, everything suggests she is, then we're looking at a level of deception that goes to the very heart of what police work is supposed to represent." "Ma'am, there's something else," Detective Santos said, lowering her voice. "I ran Reeves's activity. Reports for the past 6 months. He's been assigned to community outreach specifically in neighborhoods where there have been traumatic incidents, shootings, domestic violence cases, child abuse situations. He's been systematically targeting families with traumatized children. The pattern was becoming clear and deeply disturbing. Officer Reeves had been using his legitimate police duties as cover to identify and groom vulnerable children who were unlikely to speak out due to trauma-induced conditions like Emma's selective mutism. It was predatory behavior disguised as community service. Meanwhile, Emma's revelations continued to paint an increasingly dark picture. Shiny man say Emma special because Emma no talk. Emma perfect helper because Emma keep all the secrets. Other kids talk too much, get in trouble. Emma smart, Emma quiet. Rosa Martinez, who had been listening to her daughter's disclosures while holding her own mother on speakerphone for emotional support, suddenly looked up with a new expression of horror. "Detective Santos, I just remembered something." After Emma stopped talking, we got visits from other police officers too. They said they were checking on families affected by the shooting, making sure we felt safe and supported. How many other officers? At least 3 that I can remember. They all brought little gifts for Emma juice boxes, crayons, small toys. I thought they were just being kind. Rosa's voice cracked. How many children has he hurt? How many families has he manipulated? Detective Santos was already on her radio, coordinating with units across the city to identify other families who had been visited by officers following traumatic incidents. The scope of the investigation was expanding exponentially with each new piece of information Emma provided. Dr. Chun approached them with Emma's latest drawing, this one showing a car with what appeared to be license plate numbers. "Detective, I think Emma may have been paying more attention than anyone realized. She's drawn what looks like partial license plates for several vehicles she associates with the shiny people." Emma looked up from her coloring with the pride of a child who had accomplished something important. Emma remember numbers, like Mama teach Emma for phone. Emma good at numbers. One of the license plate fragments Emma had drawn, 7G4, matched the partial plate that Officer Sullivan had glimpsed on the black sedan that fled the park earlier. The pieces were falling into place with disturbing clarity. Captain Walsh's phone buzzed with an urgent text. She read it, her face growing grim. "We just got word from dispatch. Officer Reeves's vehicle was spotted 20 minutes ago in the parking lot of Roosevelt Elementary School. There's a weekend soccer tournament there today, hundreds of families with children. The implication hit everyone simultaneously. Reeves wasn't hiding, he was hunting. The community event at Griffith Park had been compromised, but there were other venues, other opportunities to contact families and identify new potential victims. All units, Code 3 to Roosevelt Elementary. Captain Walsh barked into her radio. Suspect is Officer Anthony Reeves, badge number 2847. Approach with extreme caution. He may be targeting children. Emma, who had been listening to the adult conversations with the acute awareness that traumatized children often develop, tugged on Detective Santos's sleeve. Shiny man say he have many helpers. He say helpers everywhere. Emma no can run from. Helpers, because helpers have special powers. The special powers Emma described were clearly the authority and access that came with police badges, but her innocent phrasing highlighted the psychological control Reeves had exercised over his young victims. He had convinced them that resistance was impossible because his helpers were everywhere. Dr. Chun leaned close to Detective Santos. Detective, I need you to understand something about Emma's psychological state. She's been carrying these secrets for months, living in terror that speaking would result in harm to her mother. The fact that she's talking now means she finally feels safe enough to trust adults again. But if Officer Reeves or his associates are still active in targeting children, her safety and the safety of other potential victims depends on how quickly you can shut down this network. As if to emphasize the point, Emma held up her newest drawing, a picture of herself holding hands with Bruno, the police dog, surrounded by other children who were smiling instead of looking scared. At the bottom, in her careful 3-year-old handwriting, she had written 2 words, "Good police." Detective Santos looked at the drawing and felt a surge of determination. Emma had shown incredible courage in breaking her silence to protect other children. Now it was up to the good police to prove they deserved her trust and ensure that no other child would have to carry the kind of secrets that had stolen Emma's voice for 8 long months. The radio crackled with updates from Roosevelt Elementary, and Detective Santos knew they were racing against time to prevent Officer Reeves from claiming another victim. Roosevelt Elementary School's weekend soccer tournament had drawn over 300 families to its sprawling athletic fields, creating the perfect hunting ground for a predator who understood exactly how to exploit parental trust. Officer Anthony Reeves sat in his personal vehicle, a gray Honda Civic, rather than his patrol car, watching families through tinted windows as children ran between games, their parents distracted by conversations and weekend relaxation. He had no idea that at that very moment, every law enforcement agency in Los Angeles County was converging on his location. Detective Santos rode in the lead vehicle of a convoy that included LAPD units, federal agents, and child protection specialists. The radio chatter was constant, urgent. Suspect vehicle confirmed in northeast parking lot. No visual on suspect himself. Repeat, no eyes on suspect. All units maintain perimeter. Captain Walsh's voice crackled through the comm system. This is a public space with hundreds of children present. We cannot risk panic or collateral damage. Wait for my signal. Back at Griffith Park, Emma continued providing crucial intelligence that was being relayed in real time to the tactical team. Dr. Chun had set up what looked like a casual play session, but was actually a sophisticated debriefing. Designed to extract every detail Emma could remember about Officer Reeves's methods and associates. Emma, you're being such a good helper, Dr. Chun said gently. Can you tell me more about the other shiny people? Did they all work together? Emma nodded solemnly, adding more figures to her ever-expanding artwork. Shiny lady too. Pretty shiny. Lady with yellow hair. She come to building with sad kids. She brings special food for kids. Food make kids sleepy. Rosa Martinez felt her blood freeze. A female officer involved in drugging children added an entirely new dimension to the horror. Emma, baby, when did you see the shiny lady? When shiny man take Emma to special house. Shiny lady say, Emma pretty girl, Emma good girl. Give Emma special cookies that taste funny. Emma's small hand paused over her crayons. After cookies, Emma feel dizzy. Everything look fuzzy. Detective Santos, monitoring the conversation via radio from her position outside Roosevelt Elementary, felt rage building in her chest. They weren't just looking at drug trafficking and child exploitation. They were looking at systematic sedation of victims to ensure compliance. At Roosevelt Elementary, the tactical situation was growing more complex by the minute. Officer Reeves had exited his vehicle and was walking casually through the family areas, wearing civilian clothes, but carrying what appeared to be official-looking credentials. Parents were responding to him with the automatic deference that police officers typically received in community settings. Target is mobile and actively engaging with families, came the report from surveillance units positioned around the schools. Perimeter. He's approaching a Hispanic family with 2 young children near the south field. Captain Walsh made a command decision that would determine whether they could stop Reeves before he claimed another victim. All units move in. Coordinate. With school security to begin evacuation procedures. I want parents and children cleared from the target area immediately. The arrest happened with the kind of precision that comes from months of tactical training, but Officer Reeves's reaction revealed the depth of his desperation and arrogance. When Detective Santos approached him with backup officers, his first words weren't denial or requests for a lawyer, they were threats. You have no idea what you're interfering with. Reeves snarled as handcuffs were applied. This operation goes higher than you can imagine. You think I'm working alone? You think I don't have protection? Detective Santos leaned close to him, her voice cold with controlled fury. Officer Reeves, you're under arrest for child endangerment, drug trafficking, and corruption of a minor. And just so you know, your 3-year-old victim found her voice. Today, Emma Martinez told us everything. The color drained from Reeves's face. For 8 months, he had relied on Emma's trauma-induced silence to protect his operation. The idea that she was not only speaking, but actively cooperating with investigators, clearly shattered his sense of invulnerability. That's impossible, he whispered. The kid doesn't talk. I made sure she understood the consequences of talking. Those words, captured on multiple recording devices, would later become key evidence in building the prosecution's case. Reeves had just confessed to deliberately traumatizing a child to ensure her silence. But even as Reeves was being transported to custody, Emma's ongoing revelations back at Griffith Park were exposing the true scope of the network he had mentioned. Dr. Chun had moved on to asking about locations, and Emma's responses were providing a roadmap to what appeared to be a multi-location operation. Emma remembered big white house with numbers, she said, carefully drawing what looked like address numbers on a building. 3-4-7- Kids sleep there sometimes. Lots of beds, all in one room. Rosa recognized the partial address. Immediately. That's on Figueroa Street. I drive past that area on my way to work. There's a house that always has different cars parked outside, people coming and going at all hours. Detective Santos, now coordinating the expanding investigation. From her vehicle, immediately dispatched units to canvass Figueroa Street for addresses matching Emma's description. Within 20 minutes, they had identified 3,471 Figueroa as a property registered to a shell company with connections to several LAPD officers' financial records. The house was under surveillance within the hour, and what officers observed confirmed. Emma's testimony in the most disturbing way possible. Children between the ages of 4 and 12 were visible through windows, supervised by adults who appeared to be rotating in shifts. The setup had all the hallmarks of a sophisticated trafficking operation, designed to use children as drug couriers, while keeping them isolated from families who might report them missing. Emma's next revelation provided the final piece needed to understand the full scope of the operation. "Shiny people have special meetings," she said, drawing what appeared to be a conference room with multiple figures around a table. Emma hid under table one time. "Shiny people talk about money, talk about special medicine, talk about which kids work best." Dr. Chun felt her professional composure crack slightly. "Emma, can you remember anything they said about which kids work best?" Emma's response chilled everyone within earshot. "Quiet kids work best. Scared kids work best. Kids with no papas work best. Kids whose mamas work lots work best. Kids who see bad things work best, because kids who see bad things know. Tell police." The systematic nature of the victim selection became clear. Officer Reeves and his associates had been specifically targeting children from vulnerable family situations, children who had experienced trauma, children whose parents were working multiple jobs and might not notice subtle behavioral changes. They had turned the aftermath of community tragedies into recruitment opportunities. Captain Walsh's voice came through the radio with an update that confirmed everyone's worst fears. Search warrant executed at 3471 Figueroa. We've recovered 17 children, ages 4 to 12. All appear to be victims of systematic exploitation. We're also finding evidence of a larger network involving at least 6 LAPD officers and unknown numbers of civilian accomplices. The sun began to set over Los Angeles. Emma Martinez, who had started the day as the traumatized child too frightened to speak, had become the key witness in what was shaping up to be the largest police corruption case in the city's history. Her courage in finally breaking her silence hadn't just saved herself. It had potentially saved dozens of other children and exposed a network of predators who had been hiding behind badges while destroying young lives. But the investigation was far from over, and Emma's safety now depended on how quickly authorities could dismantle an operation that had been years in the making. The interrogation room at LAPD's downtown division had witnessed countless confessions over the decades, but nothing quite like what unfolded when Officer Anthony Reeves finally broke down at 2:47 a.m. on Sunday morning. After 18 hours of stonewalling, legal posturing, and desperate attempts to negotiate immunity, he sat across from Detective Santos and FBI Agent Patricia Coleman, his career and life crumbling around him like a house of cards in an earthquake. "You want the truth?" Reeves said, his voice hoarse from hours of questioning. "The truth is that this city creates broken children faster than the system can fix them. We were just managing the problem." Detective Santos felt her jaw clench at the euphemism. "Managing the problem by turning traumatized 3-year-olds into drug mules? You don't understand the economics," Reeves continued, his delusion still intact even in custody. "These kids were already damaged goods. Parents working 3 jobs. No supervision, living in neighborhoods where violence is a daily reality. We gave them purpose, structure, a way to contribute." Agent Coleman leaned forward, her voice cutting through Reeves's self-justification like a scalpel. "Officer Reeves, we've recovered financial records showing you've made over $2.3 million in the past 3 years. This wasn't about helping children. This was about exploiting them for profit." A money trail had been discovered during simultaneous raids across the city. Search warrants executed at the homes of 6 LAPD officers had uncovered offshore bank accounts, luxury purchases, and most damning of all, detailed records of child assignments and drug quantities. The operation had been run with military precision, complete with backup plans rotation schedules, and performance metrics based on successful deliveries. Meanwhile, at Children's Hospital, 17 rescued children were undergoing medical and psychological evaluation. Dr. Sarah Chun, who had been working around the clock since Emma's breakthrough, was coordinating with a team of specialists to assess the extent of trauma and begin the long process of rehabilitation. The youngest victim was 4-year-old Miguel Santos, a boy whose parents had been killed in a drive-by shooting 6 months earlier. He had been living with an overwhelmed grandmother who worked night shifts as a hospital cleaner. Officer Reeves had approached the family under the guise of providing grief counseling and community support, then gradually introduced Miguel into the trafficking network. The psychological manipulation these children endured is beyond anything I've seen in 20 years of practice. Dr. Chun explained to the assembled task force of investigators, social workers, and federal agents. They were told they were helping their families, that carrying these packages was a form of community service. They were convinced that speaking about their activities would result in their parents being arrested or hurt. Emma, who had spent the night at a secure location with her mother under protective custody, continued to provide crucial details. It helped investigators understand the full scope of the operation. Her remarkable memory for faces, places, and conversations was helping them identify locations and individuals that might have remained hidden for years. Emma remembered the counting house, she told Dr. Chun during their morning session, drawing yet another detailed picture. Big room with lots of tables. Shiny people count money, put money in special bags. Kids watch TV in corner while shiny people work. The counting house, Emma described, was located within ours, a warehouse in the industrial district that served as the financial hub of the operation. When federal agents raided the location, they found sophisticated money laundering equipment, drug packaging stations, and video surveillance of the entire operation that the conspirators had kept as insurance against each other. As surveillance footage provided the smoking gun that investigators needed. Hours of video showed uniformed LAPD officers overseeing child drug packaging operations, coordinating with known gang leaders, and most shockingly, conducting what appeared to be training sessions for new child recruits. Officer Linda Morrison, the pretty shiny lady with yellow hair that Emma had described, was arrested at her Pasadena home while preparing to flee to Mexico. In her possession were detailed psychological profiles of over 40 children, complete with trauma histories, family situations, and assessments of their likelihood to remain silent about their activities. She kept files like a predator studying prey, Agent Coleman reported to the task force. Each child's psychological vulnerabilities were cataloged and exploited. Emma's file noted her selective mutism as ideal for high-risk assignments due to communication barriers. The depth of the betrayal was staggering even to seasoned investigators. These weren't just corrupt cops who had gone bad. They were individuals who had systematically studied child psychology, trauma responses, and family dynamics to create a recruitment and control system that could have operated indefinitely if Emma hadn't found her voice. Detective Santos found herself thinking about Emma's courage as she reviewed the evidence that continued to pour in from raids across the city. The little girl who had been too terrified to speak for 8 months had somehow found the strength to expose an operation that had been destroying children's lives for years. The financial records revealed the true scope of the network's reach. Drug proceeds had been funneled through children to distribution points across Los Angeles, Orange County, and Ventura County. The kids were perfect couriers, no criminal records, no suspicion from law enforcement, and most importantly, psychological conditioning that made them unlikely to report abuse or exploitation. Captain Walsh called an emergency press conference for Sunday afternoon, knowing that news of the arrests was already leaking to media outlets. The story was too big, too shocking, and involved too many high-profile arrests to contain. But she also knew that public trust in the LAPD hung in the balance. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, standing before a wall of cameras and reporters, "I'm here to announce the arrest of 7 LAPD officers and 14 civilian accomplices in what appears to be the largest child exploitation case in our department's history. This investigation began yesterday morning when a 3-year-old girl found the courage to speak after months of trauma-induced silence. The questions from reporters came rapid fire. How long had this been going on? How many children were involved? How had the department failed to detect such a massive operation within its own ranks? Captain Walsh answered what she could, but the full truth was still emerging. Each arrested officer was providing information to reduce their own sentences, revealing additional locations, victims, and accomplices. The investigation that had started with Emma pointing at a police dog was expanding into a federal case that would ultimately involve multiple states and international trafficking networks. As the press conference concluded, Captain Walsh received the message that brought the first genuine smile to her face in 24 hours. Emma Martinez, watching the news coverage from her secure location, had drawn one more picture, this one, showing herself wearing a police badge, standing next to Bruno the police dog, with the words "Emma, help catch bad guys," written in careful 3-year-old handwriting. The little girl who had been silenced by trauma had not only found her voice, but had used it to become the youngest hero in LAPD history. Her courage had exposed a network of predators and saved dozens of children from continued exploitation. But even as arrests continued and evidence mounted, investigators knew that Emma's real journey was just beginning. The child who had helped bring down corrupt officers would now need help healing from the trauma they had inflicted. 6 months after Emma Martinez first spoke the words that would topple a criminal empire, the federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles buzzed with unprecedented security and media attention. The trial of the LAPD child trafficking ring, as the media had dubbed it, was about to begin with testimony from the youngest witness in the court's history. Emma, now 4 years old and speaking in complete sentences that amazed everyone who remembered her 8 months of silence, sat in a specially designed witness area that had been created to accommodate child testimony. The courtroom had been modified with colorful decorations, comfortable seating, and even a corner where Bruno the police dog waited to provide emotional support if needed. "Good morning, Emma," said Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Torres, whose career prosecuting child exploitation cases had prepared her for difficult testimony, but nothing quite like this. "Can you tell the court your name and how old you are?" Emma looked directly at the jury with the confidence that only comes from knowing you're telling the truth. "My name is Emma Rosa Martinez, and I'm 4 years old. I helped catch the bad police who hurt kids." The statement sent a ripple through the courtroom. In the defendant's section, 7 former LAPD officers in orange jumpsuits avoided eye contact with the small girl whose courage had destroyed their lives. Officer Anthony Reeves, the ringleader, stared at his hands as Emma began recounting memories that would put him away for life. Over the course of 3 days, Emma's testimony, delivered through a combination of spoken words, drawings, and play therapy sessions conducted in front of the jury, painted a picture of systematic child exploitation that shocked even veteran prosecutors. Her remarkable memory for detail, enhanced by months of therapeutic work to process her trauma, provided evidence that corroborated hours of surveillance footage and financial records. Emma remembered the special house where sad kids lived. She told the court, pointing to a diagram Dr. Chun had helped her create. "Kids sleep on little beds all in row. Shiny man say kids lucky to have special job. Kids cry at night because kids miss mamas." Rosa Martinez, sitting in the gallery with other parents of rescued children, wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her daughter transform from victim to advocate. The little girl who had been too frightened to speak was now helping ensure that no other child would suffer the same exploitation. But Emma's testimony was just one part of a massive prosecution that had expanded far beyond the original 7 officers. The investigation had uncovered a network involving 43 individuals across multiple states, including corrupt officials in child services, educators who had identified vulnerable students, and even some parents who had been coerced into allowing their children's participation through threats and financial desperation. Miguel Santos, the 4-year-old boy whose parents had been killed in a drive-by shooting, was among the 17 children rescued from the Figueroa Street house. His grandmother, Maria Santos, testified about how Officer Reeves had manipulated her grief and financial desperation to gain access to Miguel. He came to our house wearing his uniform, carrying official papers, Maria testified through tears. He said Miguel could earn money for the family by doing simple jobs, helping police catch bad people. I thought he was offering my grandson a chance to honor his parents' memory by helping the community. The psychological manipulation revealed during the trial was staggering in its sophistication. Dr. Sarah Chun, who had worked with all 17 rescued children, testified about the systematic conditioning process that had been used to ensure their silence and compliance. These children were essentially brainwashed, Dr. Chun explained to the jury. The defendants used advanced psychological techniques typically associated with cult indoctrination or military training. They convinced vulnerable children that carrying drugs was a form of community service, that their silence protected their families, and that speaking out would result in catastrophic consequences. The defense attorneys for the 7 officers attempted various strategies, claims of following orders, assertions that they believed they were participating in legitimate undercover operations, and desperate attempts to shift blame to civilian accomplices. But the evidence was overwhelming, and Emma's testimony had provided the emotional impact that made conviction inevitable. Officer Linda Morrison, the pretty shiny lady who had kept detailed psychological profiles of victims, broke down during cross-examination when confronted with video footage of her sedating children with drugged cookies. "I thought I was helping them," she sobbed. "These kids were already broken. I thought we were giving them purpose." "You thought drugging 4-year-olds and forcing them to carry narcotics was giving them purpose?" Ada Torres asked, her voice cutting through the courtroom like ice. Morrison had no answer. The financial evidence presented during the trial revealed the staggering scope of the operation. Over $8.7 million had been laundered through the network over 4 years, with individual officers receiving between $200,000 and $500,000 annually in addition to their police salaries. The money had funded luxury homes, expensive cars, and lavish vacations, while the children who generated those profits lived in warehouse dormitories and suffered psychological trauma that would require years of treatment. Emma's healing journey had become a model for treating the other rescued children. Her remarkable recovery, facilitated by Dr. Chun's innovative trauma therapy techniques, showed that even the most severe psychological damage could be addressed with proper care and support. Emma's case taught us that children are far more resilient than we often assume. Dr. Chun testified during the penalty phase of the trial. Her selective mutism wasn't just trauma, it was also protection. Her mind found a way to survive an impossible situation. When she finally felt safe enough to speak, she didn't just recover her voice, she found her power. The courtroom gallery was filled with families whose children had been rescued, social workers who had helped in the recovery process, and police officers who were working to rebuild community trust after the scandal. Detective Maria Santos, who had led the investigation from the beginning, sat in the front row, watching Emma testify with a mixture of pride and amazement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Ada Torres said during her closing argument, 6 months ago, a 3-year-old girl found the courage to speak 2 words that would expose the largest child exploitation ring in this city's history. Emma Martinez didn't just find her voice, she used it to save dozens of other children from continued abuse and exploitation. The verdicts came after less than 4 hours of jury deliberation. Guilty on all counts for all 7 defendants. Officer Anthony Reeves received a life sentence without possibility of parole. Officer Linda Morrison received 45 years. The other 5 officers received sentences ranging from 25 to 35 years. As the sentences were read, Emma sat in the gallery with her mother, coloring in a book featuring police officers and their canine partners. When the judge announced Reeves's life sentence, she looked up from her coloring and whispered to Rosa, "Good. Now the bad, shiny man can't hurt more kids." Outside the courthouse, Captain Walsh held a final press conference about the case. Today, justice was served not just for 17 rescued children, but for every family in Los Angeles who trusts police officers to protect, conserve, rather than exploit and manipulate. Emma Martinez showed us that sometimes the smallest voices can create the biggest changes. Emma's journey from traumatized victim to courageous witness was complete, but her real work healing and helping other children find their voices was just beginning. 1 year after Emma Martinez first pointed at a police dog and spoke the words that would change her life forever, she stood confidently on the stage of the Los Angeles Convention Center, addressing an audience of 500 law enforcement officers, social workers, and child advocacy specialists at the inaugural Emma's Voice Foundation conference. "My name is Emma Rosa Martinez, and I'm 5 years old," she began, her clear voice carrying through the auditorium, without a trace of the fear that had once silenced her. "One time I was very scared and couldn't talk for a long time. But then, I met Bruno, the police dog, and he helped me be brave. Now I help other kids who are scared too." The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 3 minutes. In the front row, Rosa Martinez dabbed tears from her eyes as she watched her daughter, the same child who had spent 8 months in traumatic silence, address hundreds of adults with the poise of someone 3 times her age. Dr. Sarah Chun, who had guided Emma's recovery and now served as director of the Emma's Voice Foundation, had spent the past year developing revolutionary treatment protocols based on Emma's remarkable healing journey. The Foundation's Courage Therapy program, which combined traditional trauma treatment with police partnership and canine assistance, had already helped over 200 children across the country find their voices again. Emma taught us that healing isn't just about recovering from trauma, Dr. Chun explained to the conference attendees. It's about transforming that trauma into strength that can help others. Her willingness to testify, to continue providing details that helped investigators, and now her work with other traumatized children, shows us that survivors can become healers. The Foundation's headquarters, located in a bright, welcoming building in downtown Los Angeles, served as both a treatment center and a training facility for law enforcement officers learning to work sensitively with traumatized children. The building's walls were covered with artwork created by young clients' drawings that told stories of fear overcome, voices found, and futures reclaimed. Emma's own drawings from her early therapy sessions were displayed in a special gallery, showing her artistic evolution from dark, frightening images to bright, hopeful scenes filled with police officers helping children and families laughing together. The progression told the story of healing better than any medical report could capture. Officer Jake Sullivan, who had witnessed Emma's breakthrough at Griffith Park, had become the Foundation's Director of Police Relations. His partnership with Bruno had evolved into a specialized program where canine teams worked directly with traumatized children, using the unique bond between humans and dogs to create safe spaces for healing and communication. Bruno saved more than just Emma that day. Officer Sullivan often told the police officers he trained, "He saved all of us." He reminded us what good policing looks like: protection, service, and putting children's safety above everything else. The foundation's impact extended far beyond Los Angeles. Miguel Santos, the 4-year-old boy whose parents had been killed in a drive-by shooting, had become one of Emma's closest friends and fellow advocates. Now 6 years old and living happily with his grandmother, Miguel traveled with Emma to conferences across the country, sharing his story and encouraging other children to speak out about abuse and exploitation. Emma showed me that being scared is okay, but staying scared isn't, Miguel told a gathering of child protection workers in Chicago. When bad things happen, we can choose to help other kids, so bad things don't happen to them too. The legal ramifications of Emma's case continue to reverberate through law enforcement agencies nationwide. The Martinez Protocols, named in Emma's honor, established new standards for police interaction with traumatized children, mandatory psychological screening for officers working in community outreach, and enhanced background checks for personnel assigned to vulnerable populations. Detective Maria Santos, who had led the original investigation, now headed the LAPD's newly created Child Protection Division. The department had undergone massive reforms following the scandal, with community trust slowly rebuilding through transparency, accountability, and programs that put children's welfare at the center of policing priorities. Emma didn't just expose corruption, Detective Santos reflected during a panel discussion at the conference. She showed us what policing should aspire to be: protection of the most vulnerable, justice for those who can't fight for themselves, and courage to do what's right even when it's difficult. The 17 children rescued from the trafficking ring had all received extensive therapy and support through the foundation. Their recovery stories, while private and protected, served as inspiration for treatment protocols that were being adopted by child advocacy centers across the nation. Each child's journey was unique, but Emma's example had shown them all that survival could become strength. Rosa Martinez had transformed her own trauma into advocacy, becoming the foundation's parent support coordinator. She worked with families of rescued children, helping them navigate the complex emotions of discovering their children had been exploited and supporting them through the long process of healing and recovery. I used to blame myself for not protecting Emma, Rosa told a support group of parents whose children had been trafficking victims. But Dr. Chun helped me understand that we were all victims of a sophisticated criminal operation designed to exploit our love for our children. The real victory isn't that we were fooled, it's that our children survived and are healing. The Foundation's research division, funded by federal grants and private donations, was developing new understanding of how children process and recover from exploitation trauma. Emma's case had become a landmark study in resilience, demonstrating that with proper support, even the most severely traumatized children could not only heal but thrive. Captain Jennifer Walsh, who had overseen the investigation and subsequent LAPD reforms, often visited the foundation to observe the programs that had grown from Emma's courage. When I see Emma working with other children, helping them find their voices, I'm reminded that sometimes the most profound changes in law enforcement come not from policy or procedure, but from the courage of one small person who refuses to stay silent. As the conference concluded, Emma took the stage one final time, this time joined by Bruno, Miguel, and a dozen other children who had found their voices through the Foundation's programs. Together, they recited the organization's motto, which Emma had helped create: "Every voice matters. Every story counts. Every child deserves to be heard." The audience rose in another standing ovation, but Emma was already focused on her next mission. In the front row sat a 7-year-old girl named Sophia, who hadn't spoken since witnessing her father's arrest in an immigration raid 6 months earlier. Emma had been working with Sophia for weeks, using art therapy and play sessions to help her process her trauma. After the applause died down, Emma walked directly to Sophia and held out her hand. "Want to come draw pictures with me and Bruno?" she asked. "I know lots of good stories about brave kids who help police catch bad guys." Sophia looked up at Emma, the 5-year-old, who had survived 8 months of silence, exposed a criminal network, testified in federal court, and transformed her trauma into a foundation that was helping hundreds of other children. And for the first time in 6 months, she smiled. "Okay," Sophia whispered, taking Emma's hand. As they walked together toward the art therapy room, Emma chatted easily about police dogs, favorite colors, and the ice cream they would share after their session. Behind them, 500 adults watched in amazement as the little girl who had once been too frightened to speak continued her mission of helping other children find their voices. Emma Martinez had proven that sometimes the smallest witnesses can expose the biggest crimes. But more importantly, she had shown that the smallest healers can create the biggest changes. Her voice, once silenced by trauma, had become a beacon of hope for children everywhere who needed to know that their stories mattered, their safety was important, and their courage could change the world.